Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
He didn't realize what she meant to him when she was there. Not because he didn't care. That's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes people care deeply and still pull away. Sometimes they feel something real and immediately start acting strange. They become distracted, short-tempered, emotionally unavailable. They answer slower. They stare at their phone and don't know why they don't want to reply. They miss someone and simultaneously feel relieved when the conversation stops. And then one day, weeks later, months later, something small happens. A song, an empty apartment, a random Tuesday evening, and suddenly the feelings he avoided start arriving all at once. Not because she changed, not because he finally became enlightened, but because the distance removed all the distractions that helped him avoid what he was feeling. What looks like a sudden realization from the outside is often a very delayed emotional reaction. A realization that was quietly forming long before he ever admitted it to himself. Tonight, I want to talk about the hidden psychology behind that moment. Not the romantic fantasy version, the human version, the awkward version, the version where he spends months convincing himself he's fine, right before discovering he isn't. I think one of the strangest things about human beings is that some of the most important moments in our lives don't feel important when they're happening. Nobody talks about that enough. We imagine life-changing experiences arriving with dramatic music playing in the background. We imagine knowing. We imagine some part of us standing there saying, "Pay attention, this matters." But most of the time, it doesn't happen like that. Most of the time, the moments that eventually change us are hidden inside completely ordinary afternoons. A random phone call, a conversation in a parking lot, a drive home after dinner, a voice note we almost don't listen to, a joke we forget 5 minutes later, and somehow, months later, those are the moments we can't stop replaying. I've watched this happen so many times. Especially with men. Especially with the ones who seem completely unaware of what's happening while it's happening. The strange thing is, they're not always unaware because they don't care. Sometimes they're unaware because they assume there will be another chance, another conversation, another weekend, another late-night phone call, another moment. The human mind does something dangerous when something becomes familiar. It stops noticing it. Not because it loses value, because it becomes normal. And normal things rarely trigger alarm bells. That's why people notice the absence of something long before they fully understood its presence. I remember a guy telling me once that after she left, he couldn't stop thinking about the way she used to say goodbye. Not the deep conversations, not the emotional moments, not the dramatic parts. The way she said goodbye, that was it. The tiny thing his brain ignored hundreds of times. The thing he never thought mattered, until it disappeared. And suddenly his mind was replaying it like evidence from a crime scene. Over and over. The tone, the smile, the pause before hanging up. The way she'd always say his name. Tiny things. Painfully tiny things. The kind of details you don't appreciate because your nervous system quietly assumes they'll always be there. And that's where the misunderstanding begins. People often think his realization happened later, but that's not entirely true. The feelings were already there. The awareness wasn't. Those are different things. A person can be emotionally affected by someone long before they consciously understand how much. In fact, I'd argue that's exactly what happens most of the time, especially when the connection feels safe, especially when it becomes part of everyday life. There isn't a dramatic emotional reaction because nothing feels threatened. Nothing feels at risk. The mind relaxes. The heart relaxes. And without realizing it, he starts organizing his life around her presence. Not consciously, just quietly. She's there when he gets home. She's there in the morning. She's there in the random parts of the day nobody thinks about. The boring parts. The forgettable parts. The parts that don't seem important until they're empty. That's the thing. Human beings are terrible at measuring value while something still belongs to them. We're much better at measuring the shape of the whole afterward. I think about that sometimes. How many people confuse familiarity with insignificance? How many people stop paying attention because they assume tomorrow is guaranteed? How many relationships slowly become background music? Not because love disappeared, because routine arrived. And routine is sneaky. Routine doesn't feel emotional. It feels normal. You stop noticing her laugh. You stop noticing her patience. You stop noticing the way she remembers things you forget. You stop noticing because your brain categorizes it as expected. And expected things become invisible until one day they aren't there. Then suddenly they're everywhere. I remember another story. A man said he hadn't thought about her in weeks. At least that's what he kept telling everyone. Then one night he opened his refrigerator, and for some reason he froze. Just stood there staring, because she used to organize everything. Not obsessively, not in some dramatic way, just little things. The fruit always went in the same place. The drinks were arranged a certain way. The leftovers had labels. Tiny details. Ridiculous details. But standing there in that silent kitchen, he realized something. The refrigerator wasn't what upset him. It was the realization that hundreds of little acts of care had existed around him for years without being acknowledged. And now there was nobody left to do them. Nobody left to notice them. Nobody left to make life slightly softer in ways he never thanked her for. He closed the door, opened it again, then laughed at himself because it felt stupid. How could a refrigerator make someone emotional? But grief works like that. It sneaks through side doors. It rarely arrives in the places you expect. And that's often where the real psychological shift begins. Not in the grand moments, in the small ones. The ones that expose how deeply another person became woven into your everyday experience. The problem is that many men spend months dismissing these moments. They tell themselves they're being dramatic. They tell themselves they're just lonely. They tell themselves it's nostalgia. Maybe sometimes it is, but sometimes it's something else. Sometimes it's delayed recognition, the emotional understanding finally catching up to the emotional reality. And that process can take far longer than people realize. Weeks, months, sometimes years. Because understanding requires stillness. And stillness is exactly what many people avoid, particularly when uncomfortable feelings start surfacing. So instead they stay busy, work harder, scroll longer, watch another show, go out with friends, open dating apps, do anything except sit quietly with themselves. Because quiet has a way of exposing things that distractions successfully cover for a while. Then eventually the distractions lose their power, and suddenly the memories become louder, not the dramatic memories. That's the strange part. The ordinary ones. The Tuesday afternoons. The grocery store conversations. The random voice notes. The time she reached across the center console while he was driving and neither of them said anything. Those moments. The moments he barely registered at the time. The moments that felt completely ordinary. I think that's what surprises people the most. The realization doesn't arrive attached to some profound revelation. It arrives attached to something embarrassingly small. A coffee mug, a song, a restaurant booth, an empty passenger seat, a silence where someone's voice used to be. And suddenly, he finds himself sitting there wondering why his chest feels tight, why one random memory won't leave him alone, why he keeps replaying something that didn't seem important at the time. Then comes the uncomfortable question, the one he usually avoids, the one nobody wants to ask. What if it mattered more than I realized? Not what if she was perfect. Not what if the relationship was perfect. Just, what if it mattered more than I admitted? What if I was more affected than I thought? What if I wasn't as detached as I pretended to be? That's usually where things begin changing. Not because he suddenly becomes wise. Not because he suddenly has all the answers. Actually, it's often the opposite. He becomes confused. Things stop making sense. The story he told himself starts developing cracks. The certainty starts disappearing. And somewhere inside those cracks, awareness starts slipping through. Quietly, slowly, almost reluctantly. Because the truth is, some experiences don't reveal their importance while we're living them. They reveal their importance when they're gone. And by the time that realization arrives, he's often sitting alone with a feeling he can't quite explain. A feeling that sounds something like this. I thought I had more time. And maybe that's the most human part of all. Not that he didn't care. Not that he didn't feel. Not even that he made mistakes. It's that while life was happening, it simply felt like another ordinary day. And he had absolutely no idea that one day he'd be looking back at those ordinary moments as if they were the most important things in the world. One of the most confusing things about human behavior is that people often move closer to what they want, right before they start backing away from it. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of that, it can make you feel like you're losing your mind. Because from the outside, it doesn't make sense. He was opening up. He was becoming more consistent. He seemed more present. Then suddenly, something shifted. The replies got shorter. The energy changed. The warmth cooled. Not overnight, but enough to notice. Enough to make someone wonder, did I do something? Most of the time, she asks that question. And most of the time, the answer is no. At least not in the way she thinks. Because sometimes the distance begins right after the connection becomes real. Not before. After. That's the part people rarely talk about. I've seen men spend months chasing someone, thinking about her constantly, wanting more conversations, wanting more time, wanting more closeness. Then the moment they finally get it, something strange happens. The emotional reality arrives. And emotional reality is much heavier than fantasy. Fantasy is safe. Fantasy lives in possibility. Reality asks something from you. Reality creates vulnerability. Reality creates consequences. Reality means another human being can actually affect you. And for some people, that's where the panic starts. Not dramatic panic. Not obvious panic. The quiet kind. The kind that disguises itself as needing space. The kind that shows up as confusion. The kind that says, I don't know what's wrong, even though something is clearly wrong. I remember a man describing it once. He said there was a moment when he was sitting across from her at dinner. Nothing dramatic was happening. They weren't having a deep conversation. Nobody was crying. Nobody was confessing love. She was just talking, telling some story about her day, something completely ordinary. And suddenly he had this strange realization. He could see her in his future. Not forever, Not marriage. Not some grand romantic vision. Just future. A month from now. 6 months from now. A year from now. She felt real. And that realization hit him harder than he expected. He didn't tell her. Actually, he became quieter afterward, which sounds ridiculous. But that's what happened. Because for some people, closeness creates comfort. For others, closeness creates responsibility. And responsibility can feel terrifying when you've spent years convincing yourself that independence is safety. I think that's where a lot of misunderstandings happen. People assume emotional withdrawal always means lack of feelings. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it absolutely does. But not always. Sometimes withdrawal happens because the feelings became impossible to ignore. Which sounds backwards. Because it is. Human beings are full of contradictions. Especially when vulnerability enters the room. He wants intimacy. Until intimacy starts requiring honesty. He wants connection. Until connection starts exposing his fears. He wants someone to understand him. Until someone actually does. Then suddenly he feels exposed. Seen. Known. And not everyone knows what to do with that. Particularly if they've spent years hiding parts of themselves. There are moments when a man can feel deeply attached to someone and simultaneously want to run. Not metaphorically. Literally. Drive somewhere. Work longer hours. Find distractions. Create distance. Anything that reduces the intensity of what he's feeling. Because emotional intensity doesn't always feel good. People romanticize it. But real emotional intensity can feel overwhelming. It can make your chest tight. It can make you restless. It can make you stare at a text message for 10 minutes before responding. It can make you overthink simple interactions. It can make you afraid of saying the wrong thing. And sometimes that fear creates behaviors that look exactly like indifference. I remember one particular story. A guy finally got home after spending an entire weekend with someone he genuinely cared about. The weekend had been great. Easy. Natural. Comfortable. No conflict. No problems. Nothing bad happened. Then Sunday night arrived. And instead of feeling happy, he felt anxious. The drive home felt strange. His apartment felt strange. His phone felt heavy. She texted him. He saw it immediately. Then he didn't answer. Not because he didn't want to. Because he suddenly felt overwhelmed. So he waited. Then he felt guilty. Then he waited longer. Then he felt worse. Then he avoided it completely. Hours passed. Then a day. Then 2. By that point, he wasn't avoiding the message anymore. He was avoiding the shame. And that's how these cycles often work. What starts as emotional overwhelm becomes avoidance. Avoidance becomes guilt. Guilt becomes more avoidance. Until eventually the distance itself becomes the problem. Meanwhile, she sees something completely different. She sees inconsistency. She sees withdrawal. She sees mixed signals. And honestly, she isn't wrong. That's exactly what she's experiencing. The tragedy is that sometimes both realities are true. He's overwhelmed. She's hurt. He's confused. She's confused. Nobody is communicating clearly. Everyone is reacting to incomplete information. And the relationship starts slowly collapsing under the weight of assumptions. I think one of the hardest truths to admit is that some men become colder immediately after intimacy. Not because intimacy meant nothing, because intimacy meant too much. And before anyone misunderstands that, it doesn't excuse the behavior. Pain isn't an excuse. Fear isn't an excuse. But understanding something and excusing it are different things. A lot of people were taught how to pursue. Very few were taught how to receive love. That's a different skill entirely. Receiving love means allowing yourself to be affected, allowing yourself to need, allowing another person's presence to matter. That sounds beautiful until you're actually doing it. Then it feels dangerous. Then it feels uncertain. Then it feels like giving someone access to parts of you that you've spent years protecting. And that's where the internal conflict starts. The conflict nobody sees. The one happening at 2 in the morning. The one happening during long drives. The one happening while staring at a ceiling. The conversation sounds something like this. Why are you pulling away? I'm not. You are. I just need time. Time for what? The answer usually lives inside that silence. Because he often doesn't know. Not fully. Not yet. He just knows something feels different. Something feels bigger. Something feels harder to control. And uncertainty makes people behave strangely. Especially emotionally avoidant people. Especially people who learned early in life that dependence equals danger. Those people often don't recognize closeness as safety. They recognize it as risk, which creates one of the saddest contradictions imaginable. The thing they want most becomes the thing they fear most. So they move toward it, then away from it, then toward it again, then away again. Not because they're playing games. Usually they're playing tug-of-war with themselves. And unfortunately, everyone around them gets pulled into that battle. I've watched men convince themselves they needed space when what they actually needed was honesty. I've watched them spend weeks analyzing their feelings instead of simply feeling them. I've watched them become obsessed with finding certainty before allowing vulnerability. As if certainty exists. As if relationships come with guarantees. As if emotional safety can be negotiated in advance. It can't. That's what makes intimacy so frightening. And so beautiful. You never fully control it. At some point you simply decide whether you're willing to be known. And some people aren't ready when that moment arrives. Not because they're bad people. Not because they don't care. Because they still have unfinished wars happening inside themselves. Wars between independence and connection. Between safety and closeness. Between fear and desire. Part of him wanted to stay. Another part was emotionally halfway out the door already. Both were real. That's what makes this so complicated. And maybe that's the hidden truth underneath so much of his withdrawal. It wasn't that he suddenly stopped feeling. It was that the feelings became real enough to threaten the emotional walls he'd spent years building. And for a while, protecting those walls felt safer than risking what existed on the other side of them. The problem is that emotional protection has a cost. At first it creates relief. Later it creates distance. Then silence. Then loss. And sometimes, by the time he understands what happened, the thing he was protecting himself from losing is already gone. This is probably the chapter that makes people uncomfortable, because it doesn't fit the romantic version of the story. It doesn't fit the version where he loses her and immediately realizes everything. It doesn't fit the version where he spends every night staring at the ceiling, devastated from day one. Sometimes that happens. But honestly, a lot of the time it doesn't. A lot of the time, after the distance begins, he feels relief. And almost nobody wants to admit that. Especially not the people waiting for him to miss them. Especially not the people hoping the separation hurts him immediately. But human emotions rarely arrive in the order we expect. Sometimes the first feeling is in grief. It's relief. Not because he never cared. Not because she meant nothing. because the emotional pressure suddenly disappears. The difficult conversations stop. The uncertainty stops. The vulnerability stops. The feeling of being emotionally exposed stops. Everything becomes quieter, at least temporarily, and that quiet can feel like freedom. For a while, I remember hearing someone describe it like finally taking off a backpack he didn't realize he was carrying. Not because the backpack was bad, not because he hated carrying it. He had simply become tired, emotionally tired, mentally tired, overwhelmed by feelings he didn't fully understand. So when the connection faded, part of him relaxed. His shoulders relaxed. His thoughts slowed down. The constant emotional tension disappeared. And his first reaction wasn't heartbreak. It was exhaling. That's the truth many people don't know. Sometimes separation initially feels easier than intimacy. Intimacy asks things from you. It asks you to communicate. It asks you to be vulnerable. It asks you to consider someone else's needs. It asks you to confront parts of yourself you'd rather avoid. Distance asks almost nothing. Distance lets you hide. Distance lets you postpone. Distance lets you tell yourself everything is fine. And if someone already has a habit of avoiding uncomfortable emotions, distance can feel incredibly attractive. At first, that's the important part. At first, because relief and healing are not the same thing. People confuse them all the time. Relief is the removal of pressure. Healing is the processing of pain. Those are very different experiences. And many people mistake one for the other, especially during the first phase after separation. The phone stops buzzing. The emotional expectations disappear. The difficult conversations vanish. Life becomes simpler, or at least it seems simpler. And in that simplicity, he starts creating a story that explains why everything happened. Maybe this was for the best. Maybe they weren't compatible. Maybe he needed freedom. Maybe he wasn't ready. Maybe it wasn't meant to be. Some of those things might even be true. But here's what I've noticed. People often become very certain during periods when they're actually emotionally disconnected from themselves. Certainty can sometimes be a form of numbness, and numbness can feel remarkably convincing because numbness is quiet. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't challenge assumptions. It doesn't create emotional chaos. It simply says, "See, you're fine." And for a while, he believes it because life continues. Work still exists. Friends still exist. Bills still need paying. The world doesn't stop spinning. People keep inviting him places. There are still things to do. Distractions are everywhere, especially now. It's incredibly easy to avoid yourself. You can scroll endlessly, watch videos until midnight, answer emails, go to the gym, download dating apps, start new projects, stay busy, always busy, busy enough that no single thought stays around too long, busy enough that emotions never fully catch up. And that's where the illusion becomes powerful. Because from the outside, he genuinely looks okay. Maybe even happier. He's posting more, going out more, laughing more, being social, looking normal, looking unaffected. Sometimes he even convinces himself. That's the strange thing. Avoidance often doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like moving forward. Until it doesn't. I remember a guy describing the first few weeks after someone left. He said he honestly thought he was over it. Not pretending. Not lying. He genuinely believed it. He was sleeping fine. Working fine. Living normally. Everything seemed okay. Then one night he got home from work. Made dinner. turned on the television, sat down on the couch, and suddenly, he couldn't focus on anything. Nothing dramatic happened. No sad song. No emotional trigger. Nothing. Just silence. Ordinary silence. The kind of silence that eventually arrives when distractions run out. And for the first time in weeks, there was nowhere for his attention to go. That's when the thoughts started. Not huge thoughts. Tiny ones. Annoyingly small ones. He wondered what she would think about something funny that happened at work. Then he remembered she wasn't there. A few minutes later, he reached for his phone. Not consciously, just automatically. Some part of his body still expected her. Still expected the conversation. Still expected connection. Then came that strange hollow feeling. The one people struggle to explain. Not sadness exactly. Not yet. Just absence. And absence is sneaky. Because absence doesn't usually arrive all at once. It arrives in fragments. A habit without a destination. A thought without a recipient. A joke without someone specific to send it to. A reflex that suddenly has nowhere to go. That's when relief begins turning into something else. Something more complicated. Something harder to avoid. Because emotional processing is often delayed. The body knows before the mind does. I've seen this over and over again. The mind creates explanations. The body creates symptoms. The mind says, "I'm fine." Meanwhile, he's waking up at 3 a.m. The mind says, "I've moved on." Meanwhile, he keeps checking her profile. The mind says, "It wasn't that serious." Meanwhile, one memory keeps replaying every single night. The contradiction becomes impossible to ignore forever. Eventually, reality starts leaking through. And when it does, it usually happens in embarrassingly human ways. Not profound ways. Human ways. He walks past a restaurant. He hears a phrase she used to say. He sees a car that looks like hers. He finds an old photo while looking for something else. Suddenly his chest tightens. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to notice. Enough to feel annoyed. Because honestly, that's often the first reaction. Annoyance. Not heartbreak. Annoyance. Why am I thinking about this again? Why does this still affect me? Why can't I just let it go? The frustration comes from realizing the feelings never left. They were simply waiting. Waiting underneath the activity. Underneath the distractions. Underneath the relief. Waiting for enough quiet to finally be heard. And that's the phase nobody prepares you for. The phase where certainty starts disappearing. The phase where all the explanations stop feeling complete. The phase where he starts questioning the story he told himself. Not because someone forced him to. Because reality keeps poking holes in it. Little holes. Persistent holes. The kind that won't leave him alone. Then comes an uncomfortable internal conversation. One he may never say out loud. One that sounds something like this. Do you actually miss her? No. Are you sure? I miss certain things. Like what? And that's where the conversation gets difficult. Because suddenly he's naming things. Specific things. The way she listened. The way she laughed at jokes that weren't funny. The way she remembered details. The way she made ordinary days feel less empty. Specificity changes everything. Generalizations are easy. Specific memories are harder to dismiss. And once those specific memories begin showing up, the relief phase starts ending. Not instantly. Not dramatically. Slowly. Like fog lifting. Like realizing you've been walking in the wrong direction for a while. Not because you're foolish. Not because you're weak. Because sometimes the human mind needs distance before it can understand what it experienced. And unfortunately, distance doesn't only create clarity, it also creates consequences. Because while he's busy feeling relieved, while he's busy convincing himself everything is fine, while he's busy avoiding uncomfortable truths, time keeps moving, people keep moving, life keeps moving, and one day he looks up and realizes something unsettling. The person he assumed would always be there might actually be gone. Not temporarily, not emotionally, gone, living, growing, changing, without him. That's usually when the relief finally breaks. Not because she disappeared, because the possibility of losing her becomes real. And suddenly all that space he thought he wanted doesn't feel spacious anymore. It feels empty. And there is a difference. A very painful difference. One he couldn't see at first. Because in the beginning, the silence felt peaceful. Later, the same silence starts answering back. The strange thing about emotional denial is that it doesn't usually collapse all at once. It leaks slowly, quietly, almost embarrassingly. People imagine some dramatic realization, some huge emotional breakdown, some movie scene where he suddenly understands everything. Most of the time, it doesn't happen like that. Most of the time, reality starts leaking through tiny cracks, tiny moments, tiny triggers, tiny reminders that somehow carry far more emotional weight than they should. And at first, he doesn't even notice what's happening. That's the uncomfortable part. The awareness arrives long before the acceptance does. I remember hearing someone say, "I wasn't thinking about her." Then 5 minutes later, he mentions something she used to say. Then another thing. Then another. Without realizing it. Like his mind was quietly circling the subject while pretending not to. That's often how it starts. Not with longing. Not with heartbreak. With intrusion. Unexpected emotional interruptions. The memory appears where it doesn't belong. While brushing his teeth. While standing in line for coffee. While driving home from work. And suddenly she's there. Not physically. Just mentally. For 3 seconds. 5 seconds. Long enough to feel something. Then she's gone again. At first he dismisses it. Everybody has random memories. Everybody thinks about old relationships occasionally. No big deal. So he keeps moving, keeps distracting himself, keeps maintaining the story that everything is fine. But the interruptions keep happening, and eventually they become difficult to ignore. Because they don't arrive logically, they arrive emotionally. A smell, a phrase, a song he wasn't even paying attention to, a restaurant he forgot existed. The human brain is strange that way. It doesn't store relationships as a single memory. It scatters them everywhere. Inside sounds. Inside places. Inside routines. Inside tiny sensory details that seem completely unrelated. Then one random Tuesday afternoon, everything reconnects. And suddenly he's standing in the middle of a grocery store feeling weird for reasons he can't explain. I've seen this happen. A guy told me he was reaching for a specific brand of pasta sauce. Nothing emotional. Nothing significant. Then he remembered she hated that brand. Always complained about it. Always laughed about it. And standing there holding a glass jar in aisle 7, he felt his chest tighten. Not because of pasta sauce. Because for half a second she felt present. And then she wasn't. The feeling vanished almost immediately. But something stayed behind. A question. Why did that affect me? That's when reality starts leaking through. Not through grand realizations. Through moments that don't make sense. Because if he's truly over it, Why does a stupid jar of pasta sauce suddenly matter? Why does hearing her name somewhere make him pause? Why does seeing a certain colored jacket remind him of her? Why does his body react before his mind can stop it? Those questions start piling up, and eventually he runs out of explanations. That's the thing about emotional truth. You can delay it. You can distract yourself from it. You can argue with it. But eventually, it starts showing up into many places. I think one of the most revealing moments happens when somebody catches themselves looking. Not reaching out. Not messaging. Just looking. Checking. Searching. Maybe it's her profile. Maybe it's an old photo. Maybe it's a mutual friend's post. Whatever it is, he tells himself he's just curious. And maybe he believes that. Partially. But curiosity is often the socially acceptable name for longing. Not always, but often. Especially when the checking becomes repetitive. Especially when he keeps doing it without understanding why. I've heard men say things like, "I don't miss her," then spend 20 minutes looking at pictures from 8 months ago. Human beings are incredibly creative when it comes to avoiding uncomfortable truths. The contradiction becomes almost funny. Almost. Because underneath the contradiction is something painful. Something unresolved. And unresolved emotions have a habit of returning. Usually at inconvenient times. That's another thing nobody talks about. The timing. The timing is awful. Reality rarely arrives when you're emotionally prepared. It arrives during work meetings, at traffic lights, in grocery stores, at the gym, while watching a completely unrelated movie. Suddenly, one line of dialogue hits differently. One scene lands harder than it should, and for reasons he can't explain. He feels emotional, not devastated, just affected. Enough to notice, enough to become uncomfortable. And once that starts happening, another process begins. Memory changes. Not the facts, the emphasis, the emotional emphasis. Things he ignored before suddenly become important. Things that seemed ordinary suddenly gain weight. A memory that once felt insignificant now refuses to leave. One sentence. One conversation, one look, one moment. Replay, replay, replay. I remember someone describing a memory that haunted him for months. Not a breakup conversation, not a dramatic moment, a completely random evening. They had stopped for gas during a road trip. She went inside to buy snacks. When she came back to the car, she handed him his favorite drink without asking. That's it. Nothing profound. Nothing cinematic. Yet months later, that memory wouldn't leave him alone. Because only afterward did he realize what it represented. Attention. Care. Familiarity. Being known. The memory wasn't about the drink. It was about feeling understood. And once he realized that, he couldn't stop thinking about it. That's how emotional resurfacing works. The memory isn't important because of what happened. The memory becomes important because of what it reveals. And sometimes those revelations arrive painfully late. Painfully, because now he's looking at moments he completely overlooked when they were happening. Moments he barely acknowledged. Moments he assumed would always be available. There is a particular kind of regret hidden inside that realization. Not the regret of losing someone. The regret of not fully seeing them while they were there. That's a different ache. A quieter ache. An older ache. The kind that sneaks up on you at night. And speaking of nights, that's often where reality gets louder. Because nighttime removes distractions. The world becomes smaller. Quieter, more honest, or maybe less honest. I'm not sure. Sometimes late night thinking isn't wisdom. Sometimes it's just loneliness wearing glasses. But either way, thoughts get louder. Especially when there's nobody down. Especially when he's exhausted. That's when the internal conversations start. The ones he never says out loud. The ones nobody hears. The ones that sound something like this. You miss her. No, I don't. Then why are you thinking about her again? I don't know. Would you call her if you could? The silence usually says more than the answer. And that's what makes this stage so difficult. Because certainty is disappearing. The old explanations aren't working anymore. The emotional walls are still standing. But now they're cracking. Tiny cracks. Enough for reality to seep through. Enough for uncomfortable truths to enter. Enough for him to start seeing things differently. Not all at once. Gradually. The way dawn arrives. You don't notice the exact second darkness leaves. You just realize the room looks different. That's what happens here. The relationship starts looking different. The memories start looking different. Even he starts looking different. Because distance creates perspective. And perspective can be brutally honest. Sometimes he starts noticing his own behavior. Really noticing it. Not defending it. Not explaining it away. Just seeing it. The unanswered messages. The emotional withdrawal. The moments she tried. The moments he disappeared. The moments he said he needed space. The moments she believed him. And maybe he did need space. That's the complicated part. Maybe he genuinely did. But now he starts wondering whether space was solving the problem or simply postponing it. That's not an easy question. Most people don't enjoy asking it because it requires accountability. And accountability tends to arrive alongside grief. Not just grief for the relationship. Grief for the version of himself that didn't understand what he was doing. Grief for opportunities he missed. Conversations he avoided. Truths he delayed. By this point, reality is no longer knocking. It's inside the house. Still quiet. Still subtle. But present. And the hardest part, he still doesn't fully understand what's happening. Not yet. He just knows the emotional numbness is fading. The distractions aren't working as well. The certainty isn't as convincing. And everywhere he goes, small pieces of her keep appearing. In memories. In habits. In places. In songs. In silence. Not enough to destroy him. Just enough to keep reminding him of something he spent months trying not to see. That what he felt never actually disappeared. It simply waited. Patiently. Quietly. For the moment reality became impossible to avoid. I don't think the hardest part happens when he realizes he misses her. I think the hardest part comes afterward. When he starts arguing with himself. Because by this point, reality has already started leaking through. The distractions aren't working as well. The silence feels different. The memories have become harder to ignore. And now, he's stuck in a place that almost nobody sees. A place between knowing and admitting. Between feeling and accepting. Between missing someone and allowing himself to say it. That's where the real battle begins. Not out loud. Internally. Quietly. Relentlessly. The strange thing about emotional conflict is that it rarely sounds dramatic. It doesn't sound like movie dialogue. It sounds like someone standing in their kitchen at midnight staring into a refrigerator they aren't actually hungry enough to open. It sounds like driving home with the radio off. It sounds like lying in bed replaying one conversation for the 100th time. It sounds like checking her profile, closing it, then opening it again 10 minutes later. The argument is usually subtle, almost invisible. One voice says, "You miss her." Another immediately responds, "No, I miss the idea of her." The first voice says, "Then why are you still thinking about her 6 months later?" Silence. The second voice changes the subject. That's often how these conversations go. Not resolution, redirection. Because emotional truth has a way of cornering people. And when people feel cornered, they start negotiating with reality. I've watched men do this for months, sometimes years, creating explanations, creating loopholes, creating intellectual arguments designed to avoid emotional conclusions. Not because they're manipulative, because they're scared. And fear can become incredibly intelligent. Fear can build entire narratives. Fear can create sophisticated reasons for avoiding simple truths. One of the most common things I see is him trying to downgrade the significance of what happened. Not consciously, almost automatically. Maybe it wasn't that special. Maybe it wasn't that deep. Maybe anyone could have made me feel that way. Maybe I'm just lonely. Maybe I just miss having someone around. Maybe. The human mind loves the word maybe, especially when certainty would require vulnerability. I remember a man describing a period after a breakup where he spent months analyzing everything. Months. Every conversation, every interaction, every memory. He treated the relationship like a crime scene, looking for evidence, trying to determine whether what he felt was real, trying to determine whether what she felt was real, trying to determine whether the entire thing mattered. And one night a friend finally asked him something simple. If it didn't matter, why are you still investigating it? He didn't have an answer, because that's the contradiction. People rarely obsess over things that truly mean nothing. The obsession itself becomes evidence. Not evidence of love necessarily, but evidence of significance. Evidence that something inside him remains unresolved. And unresolved emotions are stubborn. They don't disappear because they're inconvenient. They don't disappear because they're irrational. They simply wait. Sometimes for months. Waiting for honesty. Waiting for acknowledgement. Waiting for the moment someone finally stops arguing long enough to listen. But listening is difficult, especially when the answers are uncomfortable. Because what if the answer isn't that she was wrong? What if the answer isn't that timing was wrong? What if the answer isn't that circumstances were impossible? What if the answer involves him? That's where the internal resistance usually increases. Because self-reflection is far more threatening than heartbreak. Heartbreak blames loss. Self-reflection asks questions. Questions like, why did I pull away? Why did I shut down? Why did I disappear when things became real? Why did I keep asking for space when space never actually solved anything? Those questions don't feel good. Most people avoid them. For understandable reasons. Because the answers often come with guilt. Not dramatic guilt. The quiet kind. The kind that appears when he's brushing his teeth. Or sitting in traffic. Or scrolling through old messages he swore he deleted. The kind that whispers, "You knew more than you admitted." That's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes he wasn't completely unaware. Sometimes part of him knew exactly what was happening. He just didn't want to deal with it. I think that's one of the hardest realizations a person can have. Realizing ignorance wasn't the entire problem. Avoidance was. And avoidance creates a unique kind of regret. Because ignorance feels innocent. Avoidance feels different. Avoidance means opportunities existed. Conversations existed. Choices existed. And that's much harder to make peace with. The internal dialogue starts changing around this point. The old conversations stop working. The excuses stop feeling convincing. The certainty starts collapsing. Now the voice inside sounds different. You did the best you could. Did I? Yes. Then why do I keep thinking about what I should have said? No answer. Another long silence. That's what these chapters of self-awareness often look like. Not enlightenment. Not wisdom. Long, uncomfortable silences. Moments where the mind finally runs out of explanations. And what's left behind is feeling. Raw feeling. Messy feeling. Contradictory feeling. The kind that doesn't fit neatly into a conclusion. Because here's another thing nobody talks about. He doesn't miss her every day. Sometimes he feels completely fine. Completely normal. Then something happens. A memory surfaces. A song plays. A random thought appears. And suddenly everything feels close again. That's part of what makes this process so confusing. The inconsistency. 1 week he's convinced he's moved on. The next week he's replaying old conversations while driving home. One day he feels relief. The next day he feels loss. One day he feels grateful. The next day he feels angry. Human emotions aren't organized. They're not linear. They're chaotic, especially when unfinished feelings are involved. And because they're chaotic, he starts questioning himself. Constantly. Do I actually miss her? Or do I miss being understood? Do I miss her? Or do I miss who I was with her? Do I miss her? Or do I just hate being alone? The questions multiply. The answers remain blurry. Sometimes because the truth is all of those things at once. Human emotions don't separate themselves neatly. Love mixes with loneliness. Regret mixes with nostalgia. Gratitude mixes with sadness. Relief mixes with grief. That's why closure often feels impossible. Because the reality isn't one thing. It's 20 things happening simultaneously. And somewhere inside all that confusion is another uncomfortable realization. He may have been waiting for certainty before taking action. Waiting until he completely understood his feelings. Waiting until every doubt disappeared. Waiting until every fear was resolved. But life rarely works that way. Relationships definitely don't. Sometimes certainty never arrives. Sometimes people act despite uncertainty. Sometimes courage isn't the absence of confusion. It's movement in the middle of confusion. And that's the realization that starts haunting him. Not because it provides an answer. Because it removes an excuse. Because if certainty was never required, then maybe waiting for certainty wasn't the real reason he stayed silent. Maybe fear was. Maybe pride was. Maybe shame was. Maybe he simply didn't know how to be vulnerable after making mistakes. That possibility can be difficult to face. Painfully difficult. Especially for someone who has spent years seeing themselves as rational, logical, reasonable. Because now the emotional truth is exposing something else. Something less flattering. He wasn't always acting logically. Sometimes he was reacting emotionally while pretending to be logical. That's different. And once he sees it, he can't completely unsee it. I remember someone saying, the hardest thing wasn't losing her. The hardest thing was realizing how many chances I had to be honest. That sentence stayed with me. Because honesty is rarely one big moment. It's usually 100 small moments. 100 opportunities to tell the truth. 100 opportunities to admit fear. 100 opportunities to stop pretending. And by the time he fully sees those moments, they're usually already in the past. That's what makes this chapter so painful. He's no longer arguing about whether the connection mattered. Deep down, he knows it did. Now he's arguing with something much harder. Himself. The version of himself that stayed silent. The version that avoided difficult conversations. The version that kept waiting. The version that thought there would always be more time. And unfortunately, that argument doesn't end quickly. Because unlike the relationship itself, there's nobody else in the room anymore. No messages arriving. No conversations happening. No distractions left. Just him. His memories. His contradictions. And a growing awareness that some of the questions he's asking about her were never really about her at all. They were about him. About who he was when he was scared. About who he became when intimacy felt real. About what he ran from. And why. That's when the internal argument becomes impossible to ignore. Because for the first time, the person he's been debating isn't her. It's himself. One of the cruelest things about being human is that understanding often arrives after the moment it could have changed something. Not always, but often enough. And I think that's why regret feels so different from heartbreak. Heartbreak hurts because something ended. Regret hurts because you finally understand something that was right in front of you and you didn't fully see it. At least not when it mattered. The strange thing is that regret rarely arrives with dramatic certainty. It creeps in, quietly, almost politely. At first, it doesn't even call itself regret. It disguises itself as curiosity, as nostalgia, as random thoughts, as harmless memories. Then one day you realize those memories have been visiting for months. And suddenly the question changes. It stops being, "Why do I keep thinking about her?" and becomes, "What exactly am I trying to understand?" That's when things start getting uncomfortable. Because most people assume regret is simply missing someone. But I don't think that's true. Missing someone is relatively straightforward. You miss their presence, their voice, their company, their routines. Regret is more complicated. Regret involves awareness. Awareness of choices. Awareness of opportunities. Awareness of moments that now look completely different from the way they looked at the time. I remember talking to a man who couldn't stop replaying one specific memory. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. Actually, it was painfully ordinary. She had asked him a simple question. Something like, "Are you okay?" That's it. Nothing profound. Nothing special. At the time, he brushed it off, changed the subject, made a joke, moved on. But months later, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Because looking back, he realized she wasn't asking about his day. She was trying to understand him, trying to get closer, trying to create a conversation he never allowed to happen. And suddenly, that ordinary moment felt completely different. Not because the memory changed, because his understanding changed. That's what delayed regret often looks like. The event stays the same. The meaning evolves. And unfortunately, meaning tends to evolve after distance creates perspective. Perspective is strange. When you're inside an experience, you're reacting, defending, managing, avoiding, surviving. When you're outside the experience, you're observing. And observation reveals things reaction cannot. Especially emotional truths. Especially the truths that were inconvenient at the time. I think a lot of men don't realize how much they cared until they no longer have daily access to the person. Because access can hide value. Presence can hide appreciation. Routine can hide significance. When someone becomes part of everyday life, the emotional impact gets absorbed into normality. You stop noticing. Not intentionally. Human beings simply adapt. That's what we do. We adapt to beautiful things. We adapt to kindness. We adapt to love. And adaptation can be dangerous. because what feels normal today may actually be extraordinary. You just don't realize it yet. Then the relationship ends. Time passes. Life changes. And suddenly he starts seeing things differently. Not because she's becoming more perfect in his memory. Actually, memory isn't usually that simple. He remembers the arguments too. The frustrations. The incompatibilities. The difficult moments. That's what makes this stage confusing. Because he isn't idealizing her. He's seeing her more completely. And somehow that hurts more. Because perfection is easy to dismiss. Reality isn't. The real person. The flawed person. The complicated person. The person who tried. The person who stayed longer than she probably should have. That's harder to ignore. I think one of the most painful realizations happens when he starts recognizing her efforts. Not while they were happening. Afterward. Months afterward. Sometimes years afterward. He remembers conversations differently. He remembers situations differently. Things he interpreted as pressure suddenly look like care. Things he interpreted as criticism suddenly look like concern. Things he interpreted as emotional neediness suddenly look like vulnerability. And that shift can be brutal. Because now he's looking at the same memories through entirely different eyes. I once heard someone describe regret this way. It felt like receiving a translation years after the conversation ended. That stayed with me. Because that's exactly what it can feel like. The words were always there. The meaning wasn't. Not yet. Not until experience caught up. Not until distance created clarity. Not until emotional maturity arrived. And unfortunately, clarity rarely asks whether the timing is convenient. It simply arrives. I think that's why regret often shows up during completely random moments. Not dramatic moments. Random moments. Driving at night. Folding laundry. Walking through a grocery store. Taking a shower. The mind relaxes. The defenses lower. And suddenly an old memory resurfaces. But this time it lands differently. This time he notices something he missed. A look. A hesitation. A question. A kindness. Something small. Something painfully small. And somehow that tiny detail carries more emotional weight than entire conversations. That's another thing people misunderstand. Regret rarely centers around grand gestures. It centers around overlooked moments. The moments that felt insignificant. The moments he assumed would happen again. The moments he never thought needed his full attention. Then one day he realizes they won't happen again. And suddenly those moments become priceless. I remember hearing about a man who couldn't stop thinking about one particular evening. Nothing happened. At least that's what he kept saying. They watched a movie, ordered takeout, fell asleep on opposite ends of the couch. That was it. No declarations. No emotional breakthroughs. No life-changing event. Yet years later it remained one of the memories he returned to most. Because eventually he understood what made it valuable. Peace, comfort, safety, presence, the absence of performance, the absence of pressure, just two people existing together. And by the time he recognized how rare that was, it was gone. That's where regret becomes something deeper than sadness. It's not simply mourning a person. It's mourning your delayed understanding. Mourning the version of yourself who couldn't see what was happening. Mourning the awareness that arrived too late. And unfortunately, late awareness creates its own form of suffering. Because now he starts imagining alternate versions of reality. Not fantasy. Possibility. What if I had been honest? What if I had stayed? What if I had communicated? What if I had stopped running? What if I had listened? Those questions are dangerous. Not because they're wrong, Because they have no answer. There is no alternate timeline available for comparison. Only imagination. Only speculation. Only uncertainty. And uncertainty has a way of feeding regret endlessly. That's why some people become trapped here, stuck replaying the past, searching for certainty, searching for closure, searching for proof. Proof that things could have worked. Proof that things couldn't have worked. Anything that would make the ambiguity disappear. But life rarely provides that. Sometimes the only thing left is acceptance. And acceptance takes time, especially when regret is mixed with self-awareness. Because now another layer emerges. The realization that some mistakes weren't caused by bad intentions. They were caused by emotional limitations, by immaturity, by fear, by avoidance, by not knowing how to handle what was happening. That's a difficult thing to face, because it's easier to forgive yourself for not caring. It's harder to forgive yourself for caring and still making the wrong choices. That's where many people get stuck. Not in heartbreak, in accountability, the quiet realization that love isn't always enough. Good intentions aren't always enough. Feelings aren't always enough. Sometimes emotional readiness matters. Sometimes timing matters. Sometimes self-awareness matters. And sometimes you don't realize that until afterward. Much afterward. I think that's why regret often arrives hand in hand with humility. Because it strips away certainty. It strips away ego. It strips away the stories we tell ourselves about why things happened. Eventually, all that's left is honesty. Painful honesty. The kind that sounds like this. I wasn't ready. Or maybe, I knew more than I admitted. Or maybe, I thought there would be another chance. The truth varies. But it usually lives somewhere near those senses. Not dramatic. Not poetic. Just painfully human. And perhaps that's the hardest part of all. The realization that the relationship didn't end because he never cared. Sometimes it ended because he didn't fully understand what he had while he had it. Because emotional understanding arrived late. Because appreciation arrived late. Because awareness arrived late. And late doesn't always mean useless. Sometimes late awareness changes a person's life. Sometimes it changes how they love, how they communicate, how they show up. But there's still an ache inside that growth. A quiet ache. One that whispers, if only I had understood then what I understand now. And maybe that's what regret truly is. Not punishment. Not obsession. Not even heartbreak. Just the painful distance between experience and understanding. The space between what happened and the moment he finally sees it clearly. I don't think people realize how strange memory actually is. We like to imagine memory as a filing cabinet. Organized. Logical. Predictable. Important moments go into important folders. Big experiences stay visible. Small experiences fade away. Simple. Clean. Reasonable. Except that's not how memory works at all. Memory is messy, emotional, unfair. Sometimes the moments you thought would stay with you forever disappear completely. And sometimes a random Tuesday from 3 years ago suddenly walks back into your life like it never left. That's what begins happening now. Not because he's trying to remember her. That's the strange part. The memories often arrive without permission, without warning, without logic. 1 second he's answering emails. The next second he's remembering the exact way she laughed when she couldn't stop laughing. Not the polite laugh, not the social laugh. The real one. The one that made her shoulders shake. The one she tried to hide. The one he hasn't thought about in months, maybe years. And suddenly it's there. perfectly intact, as if his mind had been storing it somewhere in secret. I think that's what catches people off guard. Not the fact that they remember. The fact that they remember details. Specific details. Painfully specific details. The human brain doesn't hold onto details unless something mattered. Maybe not consciously. Maybe not at the time. But emotionally. Something registered. Something landed. Something stayed. I remember hearing a man describe the exact moment he realized this. He was sitting at a red light after work. Nothing unusual. Just another drive home. Then a song came on. Not their song. Not even a meaningful song. Just a song that happened to be playing one evening when they got stuck in traffic together. That was it. And suddenly he wasn't thinking about the song anymore. He was remembering the way she reached across the center console and stole one of his fries. The way she looked out the window. The way she rolled her eyes at one of his terrible jokes. Tiny things. Ridiculously tiny things. Yet there he was, sitting at a traffic light years later, feeling emotional over French fries. Human beings are strange. Or maybe we're not. Maybe this is exactly how attachment works. Maybe the moments that stay with us aren't the dramatic ones. Maybe they're the moments where we felt most alive without realizing it. Most comfortable. Most ourselves. I don't know. I'm not completely sure. But I do know this. The memories that return aren't always the ones you'd expect. Sometimes they aren't even the happy memories. Sometimes they're unfinished moments. Moments where nothing happened. Moments where something almost happened. Moments where he almost said something. Almost admitted something. Almost stayed. Almost reached out. Those memories can become surprisingly loud. Because unfinished experiences tend to linger. The mind hates incomplete stories. It keeps returning to them. Searching for resolution. Searching for meaning. Searching for a version of the ending that never existed. And that's when the replaying starts. Not once. Not twice. Repeatedly. The same sentence. The same conversation. The same look. Over and over. I remember someone saying there was one sentence she spoke that followed him for months. Not because it was romantic. Not because it was profound. Because he didn't understand it until later. She had said, "You don't have to handle everything by yourself." At the time he shrugged it off. Changed the subject. Made some joke. The conversation moved on. Months later he couldn't stop hearing it. Not because of the words. Because of what the words revealed. She saw him. She saw the thing he was trying to hide. The exhaustion. The loneliness. The pressure. And somehow she saw it before he did. That's what memory does sometimes. It reopens moments with new information. The memory stays the same. The understanding changes. And suddenly a sentence that once felt ordinary becomes impossible to forget. I think that's when he starts realizing something uncomfortable. The relationship occupied far more space inside him than he admitted. Not because he was obsessed. Because he was affected. Those aren't the same thing. Being affected by someone doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like remembering their coffee order years later. Sometimes it looks like hearing a phrase and instantly thinking of them. Sometimes it looks like standing in a bookstore and reaching for a book you know they would have liked. Then remembering they aren't there. The body often remembers before the mind does. That's something I've noticed over and over. His hand reaches for the phone. His eyes search a crowd. His attention shifts towards something he'd normally want to tell her. Automatic reactions. Tiny reflexes. Proof that somewhere inside him, she became part of the map. Part of the way he moved through life. And removing someone from that map takes longer than people expect. Sometimes much longer. The difficult part is that these memories don't arrive in order. There's no structure, no timeline, no neat progression. One day, he's remembering something from the beginning. The next day, he's remembering something from the end. Then something completely random. Then nothing for a week. Then everything at once. The inconsistency makes him question himself. Again, because by now questioning himself has become a habit. Why am I remembering this now? What does this mean? Am I moving backward? Am I still stuck? Maybe. Maybe not. Sometimes memory isn't a sign that you're stuck. Sometimes memory is a sign that your mind is finally processing something it postponed. There's a difference. A huge difference. But when you're inside the experience, it rarely feels clear. It just feels confusing. And emotional confusion tends to create strange behaviors. Like opening old conversations. Not to read everything. Just one message. Then another. Then another. Like revisiting old photos. Not because he wants to torture himself. Because he's looking for something. Though he often doesn't know what. Maybe understanding. Maybe reassurance. Maybe proof. Maybe a version of her that only exists in memory now. Whatever it is, the search rarely satisfies him. Because memory is complicated. Memory isn't objective. It highlights certain things, hides others, magnifies emotions, softens edges. And yet, even knowing that, he keeps returning. Because certain memories carry emotional weight that facts alone cannot explain. I think one of the hardest memories to carry is the memory of being known. Not loved. Known. Those are different things. Lots of people love us. Very few truly know us. Know our habits. Know our moods. Know the look on our face before we admit something is wrong. Know when we're pretending. Know when we're tired. Know when we're scared. Those memories tend to survive long after everything else fades. I once heard someone say the thing he missed most wasn't her presence. It was how easy it felt to exist around her. That sentence stayed with me because it's so specific, so human, so unromantic, and somehow more emotional because of it. Not passion, not chemistry, ease. The memory of ease. The memory of not performing. The memory of being accepted without constantly managing an image. That's harder to replace than people realize. And when those memories begin resurfacing, another realization starts forming. A quiet realization. The kind that arrives gradually. Memory after memory. Detail after detail. Moment after moment. Until eventually he sees a pattern. Not just isolated memories. A pattern. The pattern says something he spent a long time avoiding. It says she mattered. Maybe more than he admitted. Maybe more than he understood. Maybe more than he was prepared for. And the evidence isn't dramatic. It's scattered. Hidden inside hundreds of tiny moments. Tiny moments that refuse to disappear. The way she pronounced certain words. The way she touched his arm when she was excited. The way she got quiet when she was hurt. The way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Fragments. That's all memory gives him. Fragments. Yet somehow those fragments feel more honest than entire stories. Because stories can be rewritten. Fragments cannot. The details remain. The details survive. And eventually the details become impossible to argue with. Because by now he isn't just remembering her. He's remembering himself. Who he was around her. Who he became around her. The version of himself that existed in those moments. And maybe that's why the memories hurt. Not because they're gone, because they're real, because they happened, because they mattered, and because no amount of distance can fully erase the things that once became part of you. So the memories keep arriving, unexpectedly, quietly, without permission. A laugh, a sentence, a smell, a song, a traffic light, a French fry, a random Tuesday afternoon. And every time they appear, they whisper the same uncomfortable truth. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to be heard. You remember because it mattered. And deep down, you're finally starting to understand how much. I think there comes a point in every deeply emotional experience where the person stops questioning the relationship and starts questioning themselves. Not in a dramatic way, not in the kind of way social media likes to portray. There isn't some sudden transformation. There isn't a moment where everything becomes clear. It's much messier than that. Much slower, much more uncomfortable. Because eventually the memories stop being the main story. The relationship stops being the main story. Even she stops being the main story. And the focus begins shifting somewhere else. Toward him. Toward the person he was while all of this was happening. Toward the choices he made. The reactions he justified. The fears he disguised. The stories he told himself. And that's where things start breaking open. Not his heart. His identity. Or at least the version of himself he has spent years believing. Because most people carry an image of who they think they are. We all do. I'm independent. I'm logical. I'm emotionally strong. I don't need anyone. I make good decisions. I'm honest. The problem is that real life eventually tests those beliefs. And relationships have a way of exposing the gap between who we think we are and who we become when emotions get involved. That gap can be difficult to look at, especially for someone who spent years feeling certain about themselves. I remember talking to a man who kept insisting he was emotionally unavailable. That was his explanation for everything. His identity. His conclusion. His answer. I'm just emotionally unavailable. Simple. Clean. Easy. Until one day he admitted something. He wasn't emotionally unavailable. He was emotionally terrified. That's different. Very different. One description sounds like a personality trait. The other sounds like fear. And fear requires a different kind of honesty. The moment he said it, you could almost hear something cracking. Not collapsing. Cracking. Because identities are protective. They help us make sense of ourselves. Sometimes they help us avoid ourselves too. That's what starts happening now. The explanations that once felt solid begin losing their power. The old story doesn't fit anymore. And when the story stops working, reality becomes harder to avoid. I think this is one of the loneliest stages. Because there isn't anyone to blame anymore. Not completely. The relationship is already over. The arguments are over. The distractions aren't working. The memories have been replayed 1,000 times. Now he's left with something far more difficult. His own reflection. And reflections can be brutal. Not because they're cruel. Because they're honest. Painfully honest. I remember hearing someone describe this phase as realizing he had become a stranger to himself. At first, I thought that sounded dramatic. Then I understood what he meant. Because sometimes you spend years acting from instinct, reacting automatically, avoiding automatically, pulling away automatically, without ever asking why. Then one day you finally stop long enough to observe yourself. And the observation isn't flattering. You notice things you'd rather not notice. The way you disappear when conversations become vulnerable. The way you create distance when somebody gets close. The way you convince yourself you need freedom when what you actually feel is fear. The way you pretend confusion when the truth is sitting directly in front of you. Those realizations don't feel empowering. At least not initially. They feel humiliating. Because now he has to confront an uncomfortable possibility. Maybe the problem wasn't that he didn't know. Maybe the problem was that he knew enough. Enough to choose differently. Enough to ask better questions. Enough to recognize what was happening. Not perfectly, but enough. That's where accountability starts becoming real. Not performative accountability. Not social media accountability. Real accountability. The kind nobody sees. The kind that happens alone. At night. In silence. When there's nobody around to defend you from yourself. I think one of the hardest moments happens when he starts seeing patterns. Not isolated mistakes. Patterns. That's different. Anyone can dismiss a mistake. Patterns are harder. Patterns suggest repetition. Patterns suggest history. Patterns suggest this wasn't the first time. Maybe he pulled away in previous relationships too. Maybe he avoided difficult conversations before. Maybe he always needed space when emotions became intense. Maybe he always convinced himself the problem was external. Different person. Different circumstance. Different timing. Same outcome. At some point that becomes difficult to ignore. And when it becomes difficult to ignore, another internal dialogue begins. A more honest one. A more uncomfortable one. It sounds something like this. Why do I keep doing this? Silence. Then, because you're scared. No, it's more complicated than that. Is it? Silence again. Those moments happen more often than people realize. The quiet arguments. The ones where truth keeps simplifying things and the mind keeps complicating them. Because complexity can be protective. Complexity creates distance. Simplicity creates accountability. And accountability hurts. Especially when it exposes self-sabotage. That's another word people use too casually. Self-sabotage. But sometimes it really is that. Not intentional destruction. Unconscious protection. Protection that eventually becomes destructive. That's an important distinction. He wasn't trying to ruin something meaningful. He was trying to protect himself from vulnerability. The tragedy is that the protection itself became the problem. I've noticed that many people reach this stage and suddenly start remembering conversations differently. Not because memory changed, because perspective changed. Now he's hearing things he missed before. She wasn't asking for perfection. She was asking for honesty. She wasn't demanding certainty. She was asking for presence. She wasn't asking him to have all the answers. She was asking him to stay in the room emotionally. And somehow those requests felt overwhelming at the time. Now they seem heartbreakingly reasonable. That realization can crack something open. Because suddenly the story of being misunderstood starts falling apart. Not completely. Relationships are complicated. Both people contribute. But the comforting narrative that he was simply a victim of circumstances begins weakening. And what's left behind is more nuanced, more human, more difficult. He starts realizing that he participated in his own loss. That sentence hurts. It should hurt. Not because it's about blame, because it's about agency. Agency means choices matter. Choices create responsibility. Responsibility creates growth. But growth rarely arrives before discomfort. The discomfort comes first. Always. And by this point, discomfort is everywhere. Even in ordinary moments. I remember hearing about a man who suddenly found himself emotional while cleaning his apartment. Not because cleaning was meaningful, because he found a receipt. An old receipt. A meaningless piece of paper. Except it wasn't meaningless anymore. It was from a day he'd forgotten. A day they spent together. A day that felt ordinary at the time. And standing there holding that receipt, he wasn't thinking about her. At least not directly. He was thinking about himself. The version of himself from that day. The version who still believed there would always be more time. The version who didn't know what was coming. The version who had opportunities he no longer possessed. That's when grief becomes layered. It's not just grief for the relationship. It's grief for old identities, old assumptions, old versions of self. The version who thought avoiding vulnerability was strength. The version who confused independence with emotional isolation. The version who believed distance automatically created safety. Those beliefs start collapsing now. Not dramatically, quietly, one by one. And every collapse creates space for a different question. A question that feels both terrifying and necessary. Who am I without those defenses? Because that's really what this chapter is about. Not losing her. Losing the emotional armor. Losing the explanations. Losing the familiar identity. The identity that once made everything feel predictable. The identity that once protected him from difficult truths. Now those truths are here. And they aren't leaving. Not because they're punishing him. Because they're trying to teach him something. Though honestly, even that sounds too neat. Too clean. Sometimes there is no lesson. Sometimes there is only awareness. Awareness that arrives late. Awareness that hurts. Awareness that changes the way he sees himself forever. And maybe that's the hidden turning point. Not when he realizes she mattered. Not when he realizes he misses her. But when he realizes the person who lost her is not exactly the person he thought he was. That's the crack. The real crack. The moment identity begins giving way to honesty. The moment self-protection stops feeling safe. The moment he starts seeing himself clearly. Not perfectly. Not completely. But clearly enough. Clearly enough to understand that the relationship wasn't the only thing ending. An old version of him was ending too. And as painful as that realization is, there's no going back once you've seen it. Because once the cracks appear, you can't pretend the wool is still whole. This is probably the chapter that frustrates people the most. Because by now, everything seems obvious. He knows. Or at least he knows more than he used to. The denial has cracked. The memories have returned. The regret has arrived. The old identity is falling apart. He's spent months replaying conversations, questioning himself, recognizing patterns, and confronting truths he's spent a long time avoiding. So the obvious question becomes, why doesn't he do something? Why doesn't he call? Why doesn't he text? Why doesn't he reach out? If he understands now, why is he still silent? The answer is uncomfortable. Because awareness and action are not the same thing. Not even close. People assume that once someone realizes the truth, they'll automatically change. But human beings don't work that way. Sometimes understanding creates movement. Sometimes understanding creates paralysis. And paralysis is far more common than most people realize. Especially when shame gets involved. I think that's the part many people miss. Fear gets all the attention. But shame is quieter, more complicated, and often far more powerful. Fear says, what if she rejects me? Shame says, you deserve it. Fear imagines a bad outcome. Shame believes the bad outcome is justified. That's a completely different experience. And once shame enters the picture, reaching out becomes much harder. Because now he isn't only afraid of losing her, he's afraid of facing himself. I've watched this happen more times than I can count. Someone finally becomes honest about what they feel, finally admits what happened, finally sees their own rule clearly, and then nothing. No action, no message, no conversation, just silence. From the outside, it looks ridiculous, even cowardly. Sometimes it is, but often something more complicated is happening underneath. Because now every possible action carries emotional risk. And people who spent years avoiding emotional risk don't suddenly become brave overnight. That's one of the most misunderstood parts of growth. Awareness arrives first. Courage arrives later. Sometimes much later. Sometimes not at all. I remember a man telling me he wrote the same text message 37 times. 37. He knew because he counted. He'd open his phone, type something, delete it, type something else, delete that too. Hours, days, weeks. The message never got sent. Not because he didn't care, because every version felt wrong. Too emotional, too cold, too late, too selfish, too complicated. Nothing felt safe enough. Eventually, he stopped writing entirely. Not because the feelings disappeared, because the pressure became exhausting. And that's the strange thing about unresolved emotions. People imagine they create urgency. Sometimes they create hesitation, massive hesitation, because now every choice feels loaded. Every possible outcome feels significant. The silence starts feeding itself. The longer he waits, the harder it becomes. The harder it becomes, the longer he waits. A perfect cycle. A miserable cycle. One that traps people for months. Sometimes years. I think another reason he doesn't reach out is something people rarely admit. Part of him believes he lost the right. Not legally. Emotionally. There's a difference. When someone knows they contributed to the distance. When someone knows they disappeared. When someone knows they ignore opportunities. A strange thing happens. The desire to reconnect becomes tangled with guilt. He wants to speak, but he also thinks, why should she listen? He wants another chance, but he also thinks, why would she trust me? He wants to explain, but he also knows explanations don't undo consequences. And suddenly every impulse toward connection gets interrupted by accountability. That's not always a bad thing. Accountability matters. But accountability without self-forgiveness can become paralysis. That's where many people get stuck. Not in growth, not in reflection, in punishment. Quiet self-punishment. The kind nobody notices. The kind that sounds like, it's too late. She's probably happier now. I'll only make things worse. She deserves better. Maybe those statements are true. Maybe they aren't. But that's not really the point. The point is that they often become emotional hiding places. Ways of avoiding vulnerability while appearing noble. That's another uncomfortable truth. Sometimes giving up sounds mature. Sometimes it's just fear wearing a mature outfit. Not always. But sometimes. The human mind is clever like that. It can disguise avoidance as wisdom. It can disguise fear as respect. It can disguise passivity as acceptance. And because the disguise looks reasonable, he believes it, at least partially. Then there are the moments that nobody sees. The almost moments. The moments right before action. I think those are some of the saddest moments. Not because they're dramatic, because they're ordinary. It's 11:40 p.m. He's lying in bed, The room is dark. He picks up his phone, finds her name, stares at it. His heart starts beating faster. Not metaphorically, actually faster. His body reacts before his mind finishes deciding. He opens the conversation, reads old messages, smiles at one, feels terrible after another, starts typing, stops, starts again, stops again, then locks the phone, places it face down, turns over, pretends to sleep. The next morning he tells himself it was for the best. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. That's the problem. He doesn't know. And uncertainty makes action difficult, especially when emotional stakes are high. I think one of the hardest realizations is that understanding doesn't erase fear. People expect growth to feel empowering. Sometimes growth feels terrifying, because now he sees exactly what he stands to lose. Before, ignorance protected him. Now, awareness exposes him. Before, he could pretend it didn't matter. Now he knows it did. Before, rejection was theoretical. Now it feels personal, painfully personal. That's why some people become more hesitant after self-awareness, not less. Because now they understand the consequences. Now they understand the value. Now they understand what was actually at stake. And suddenly vulnerability feels enormous. There is another layer too, a quieter layer, one that rarely gets discussed. Sometimes he doesn't reach out because he's afraid she's changed. Not changed physically, changed emotionally, moved on, grown, become someone who no longer needs him. That possibility can feel devastating, not because he wants control, because he wants relevance. There's a difference. Most people don't want to discover their chapter someone else has already finished reading, especially when they're still rereading it themselves. That's painful, embarrassingly painful, and very human. I remember hearing someone say, "I was terrified she'd answer." Then, after a pause, he added, "I was terrified she wouldn't." That might be the most honest description of emotional paralysis I've ever heard, because both outcomes felt frightening. Silence hurts. A response hurts. Hope hurts. Acceptance hurts. Everything carries emotional risk. And when every direction feels risky, people often choose inaction. Not because it's healthy, because it feels controllable, at least temporarily. But temporary avoidance has a cost. It creates new regrets, new questions, new late-night conversations with himself. What if she would have answered? What if she would have understood? What if the story I'm telling myself isn't true? Those questions linger, sometimes for a very long time, because uncertainty rarely disappears on its own. It just changes shape. And eventually, he starts realizing something difficult. The silence he thought was protecting him is hurting him too. Maybe not immediately, maybe not dramatically, but gradually, quietly. The silence becomes another unfinished conversation, another unresolved story, another thing he carries around. And by now, he's carrying enough memories, enough regret, enough self-awareness, enough unanswered questions. The strange thing is that he may still do nothing. That's the reality nobody likes to admit. Understanding doesn't guarantee action. Self-awareness doesn't guarantee courage. Growth doesn't guarantee reconciliation. Sometimes people learn the lesson and still stay silent. Sometimes they finally understand everything after the moment has passed. That's tragic, but it's human, because people are not machines. They don't act according to logic alone. They hesitate. They overthink. They retreat. They doubt themselves. They become afraid. They become ashamed. They convince themselves they have more time. Then sometimes they discover they don't. And somewhere inside all of this is the deepest truth of the chapter. His silence and always proof that he doesn't care. Sometimes it's proof that he cares more than he's prepared to handle. Not always, but sometimes. Sometimes the silence is not emptiness. It's conflict. It's fear. It's uncertainty. It's 1,000 unfinished thoughts trapped behind one unsent message. And the most painful part, the longer that message remains unsent, the more impossible sending it begins to feel. Until one day he realizes something. The question is no longer, should I reach out? The question has become, why am I still so afraid to? And for the first time, he stops looking for answers in the relationship and starts looking for answers in himself. By the time he gets here, something has changed. Not completely, not neatly, not in the kind of way people post quotes about. Actually, if we're being honest, this stage often looks far less inspiring than people expect. There are no dramatic breakthroughs, no perfect closure, no final answer waiting at the end. Just a different kind of understanding, a quieter one, a heavier one. Because eventually, after enough memories, enough regret, enough late-night conversations with himself, he begins realizing something uncomfortable. This was never only about her, and that realization lands strangely. At first, it almost feels disappointing, because part of him still wants this story to be about the relationship. Relationships are easier. They're external. They give us something to focus on, someone to miss, someone to blame, someone to understand. But eventually the spotlight starts moving, slowly, reluctantly, toward him, toward the things that existed long before she arrived. The fears, the defenses, the habits, the emotional reflexes, the ways he learned to survive. Because that's often what they are. Survival strategies, not personality traits, not permanent truths. Strategies, things that once protected him, things that eventually began costing him. I think one of the most painful realizations happens when he understands that he wasn't really running from her. Not entirely. He was running from what she made him feel. That's different. A very different thing. People say they fear commitment. I don't think that's always true. I think many people fear exposure. They fear being known deeply enough that their excuses stop working. They fear becoming emotionally visible, because visibility creates vulnerability, and vulnerability creates uncertainty. I remember hearing someone describe it this way. He said, "When she got close, I felt like there was nowhere left to hide." At first that sounds romantic, until you really think about it. Then it sounds terrifying, because hiding had been part of his identity for years. Not lying, not pretending, just selectively revealing, managing perception, controlling access, keeping certain doors locked. Then someone arrives. Someone patient enough, observant enough, present enough, and suddenly those locked doors don't feel quite as secure. That experience can change a person, not because the relationship was magical, because it exposed something that was already there, something waiting to be noticed. And that's what he finally begins understanding now. The relationship wasn't the source of the fear. The relationship revealed the fear. That's an entirely different story. I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. They spend years analyzing the relationship itself. What happened? What didn't happen? Who said what? Who left? Who stayed? Who made mistakes? All important questions. But eventually another question becomes more important. What was I protecting? Not from her. From myself. That's where things get interesting. And painful. Usually both. Because once he starts asking that question honestly, old memories begin connecting in ways they never did before. The withdrawal. The silence. The need for space. The hesitation. The avoidance. The emotional confusion. They stop looking like separate events. They start looking like a pattern. And patterns tell stories. Stories about fear. Stories about self-worth. Stories about trust. Stories about what someone learned long before this relationship ever existed. That's what makes this chapter different. He's no longer trying to understand her. He's trying to understand himself. And honestly, that's a much harder task. Because now there's nobody else to focus on. Nobody else's behavior to analyze. Nobody else's choices to examine. Just his own. I remember a man saying something that stayed with me. He said, "The hardest part wasn't admitting I loved her. Plus, the hardest part was admitting how afraid I was." That sentence felt important. Because fear often hides behind more acceptable explanations. Independence, logic, timing, compatibility. All those things can be real. But sometimes underneath them sits something simpler. Fear. Fear of needing. Fear of depending. Fear of disappointing someone. Fear of being disappointed. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of being seen. Fear of not being enough. The specific fear varies. But eventually he starts finding it. Not all at once. In pieces. Fragments. Moments. Tiny realizations. The way all meaningful self-awareness tends to arrive. I think another difficult truth emerges here. Growth doesn't erase grief. People expect understanding to create peace. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes understanding creates sadness. Because now he sees everything more clearly. Not just the relationship. The opportunities. The conversations. The versions of himself that existed back then. And clarity can hurt. A lot. Especially when it arrives after consequences. Because now he understands things he couldn't understand before. And understanding doesn't give him the power to rewrite the past. That's the frustrating part. Wisdom often arrives after the test, not before it. You don't become emotionally aware and then make mistakes. Sometimes you make mistakes and become emotionally aware because of them. That's not inspiring. It's just true. Painfully true. Humanly true. I think that's why this chapter feels quieter. The urgency starts fading. The obsession starts fading. Even the regret changes shape. Not disappearing. Changing. Because eventually he realizes something. The goal was never to stop caring. The goal was never to erase the memories. The goal was never to become indifferent. The goal was understanding. And understanding is finally beginning to arrive. Not complete understanding. Just enough. Enough to see the bigger picture. Enough to stop fighting reality. Enough to stop rewriting history. Enough to stop pretending the relationship was either perfect or meaningless. It was neither. It was real. Complicated. Imperfect. Human. Just like he is. Just like she is. I think one of the most mature realizations happens when he stops asking, "Could we have worked?" and starts asking, "Why did I become who I was in that relationship?" That's a different question. A deeper one. A more useful one. Because the first question keeps him trapped in the past. The second question changes the future. Not immediately, but eventually. And that's what growth often looks like. not becoming somebody new. Understanding who you've been all along. Then deciding what happens next. There's another thing nobody talks about. Sometimes she never comes back. Sometimes he never reaches out. Sometimes they never have the conversation. Sometimes there's no reconciliation. No second chance. No perfect ending. Just distance. Time. Separate lives. And somehow, the lesson still remains. Not because suffering is noble. Not because loss is beautiful. Because reality has a way of teaching us whether we're ready or not. The relationship may end. The self-awareness stays. The memories stay. The understanding stays. The uncomfortable truths stay. And eventually they become part of him. Part of the person he's becoming. I think that's the hidden transformation people misunderstand. It's not about becoming wiser overnight. It's not about achieving emotional perfection. It's not about finally saying all the right things. It's much quieter than that. It's the moment he catches himself withdrawing and notices. The moment he feels fear and names it. The moment he wants to run and pauses. The moment he realizes he has a choice. Maybe for the first time, a real choice. Not between her and freedom. Not between closeness and independence. A choice between repeating the pattern or facing it. That's where everything changes. Not externally, internally. And perhaps that's why this entire experience was never really about losing her. Losing her was the event. Understanding himself was the process. The event happened quickly. The process took much longer. Months, years sometimes. Because self-awareness moves slowly. Especially when it has to travel through denial, regret, grief, memory, fear, and pride before finally reaching honesty. And even now, honesty doesn't solve everything. There are still unanswered questions. Still unfinished feelings. Still moments he replays. Still nights where the silence feels heavier than he wants to admit. That part doesn't disappear. At least not entirely. But something is different now. The silence no longer feels empty. It feels revealing. Because hidden inside all those memories, all that regret, all those late realizations, was a truth he spent a very long time avoiding. Not that she mattered. He already knows that. The deeper truth. The one underneath everything. That the person he was becoming could no longer survive behind the walls the old version of him built. And maybe that's the real awakening. Not discovering how much he loved her. Discovering how much of himself he had never been willing to meet. Until now. Until the loss. Until the silence. Until there was nowhere left to run. And even then, the story doesn't end. It simply becomes more honest. Which, in real life, is often the closest thing we ever get to an ending. Outside the writing itself, one final thought. The strongest emotional ending for the YouTube video would be to follow this chapter with a 300 to 500 word closing reflection that feels unresolved, intimate, and slightly haunting rather than inspirational, leaving viewers with the feeling that some realizations arrive too late to save a relationship, but not too late to change a person forever.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.